is a presentation by the Department of Ed, and as our Assistant Commissioner talked about earlier today, we work in numerous different focus areas: academics, student readiness, and educators, and students in foster care cross into all of those paths. So every single facet of what we do is important for our children in foster care. We are going to take a look today at several different pieces. I'm going to give you a general framework for how students in foster care and educational stability works through ESSA, what some of the responsibilities are for foster care points of contact, how we identify our students in foster care, how we conduct best interest determination meetings, how we look as a state, and specifically how your work intersects with this particular piece of ESSA. Before we start, you have to know about me that I have worn multiple hats in my life, just like you do in your professional worlds. I've been a high school principal, I've been a teacher, I've been a special ed director, I've run a school for students with emotional disabilities, and I'm also a social worker. And when I put that social worker hat on, it really forces me to ask the question, how would it feel if we stepped into the shoes of the children that we serve? So I want to frame our conversation today around the lens of foster care and what it's like to live in a world through the eyes of a child in foster care. And to do that, I just want to ask you to take a breath for a moment and imagine yourself as a 12-year-old. Imagine that you are living with your single mom. She's struggling with addiction and dependency. Sometimes she's not home. Sometimes she's not home for several days. You have brothers and sisters that you care for. You make sure they have clothing. You make sure they get to school. You make sure you have food for them, and even if it's just a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at night, and that they're eating breakfast in the morning, and you're doing okay, you think. You go to school every day because that's, you have a teacher that you adore, and that's real stability for you. But tonight, somebody knocks at your door, and there's a police officer standing there, and he has this woman with him that looks rather harsh, and they say to you, kid, I'm sorry, we don't know where your mom is, and you can't stay here by yourself. So you're going to have to come with us. And you think you're fine, and you think your brothers and sisters are fine because you've been doing this for a while. You understand that she'll be back at some point. But they hand you a 33-gallon garbage bag, and they say to you, I want you to put everything you think you're going to need into this garbage bag, and it's all you can take, and we're leaving in 15 minutes. And by the way, you can't take your pets. You can't take anything that's alive with you, and you can't take anything perishable, so you can't take any food. I want you to just take a moment and think about what you would take with you. What would your 12-year-old self put into that 33-gallon garbage bag? And this is really what we do. DCS workers carry big Sam's Club containers of garbage bags in their cars, and they hand them to children, and they ask them to pack up, and we don't know if you're coming back. So just think, what kinds of things would you take with you? And if you have in your mind formulated what's going with you, take a look around the room and think about everything you've left behind. And when we actually talk to foster children about this very question, what did you take with you and what did you leave behind, know that their answers are really profound. They don't talk about clothes and toys they left behind. They talk a lot about the pets that they couldn't bring with them. But they talk about things like, I left my dignity behind. I left my safety behind. I left any relationship I thought I had with my mom behind because I love my mom and I want her to be okay. So you have your 33-gallon garbage bag. Your brothers and sisters have theirs. You had 15 minutes to pack everything up, and off you go. Now I want you to think about the positions that we are all in. Some of you are foster care points of contact. Some of you are not. But we all impact children in school districts. What happens if we had the power to eliminate some of that trauma? What would happen if we had the ability to provide some sort of safety net and some sort of stability for the children carrying the 33-gallon garbage bags to the DCS office where they're likely going to stay for the next 48 hours until they can find a bed? We know that children in foster care are incredibly vulnerable. We know that they make more unscheduled school changes than any of their peers in a given school year. We know they have lower high school graduation rates, and we know the more you move, the less likely you are to graduate. We know that they have lower scores on academic assessments. We know that we retain them at higher numbers. They are more likely to be absent, suspended, and expelled. But again, what if we had the power to try and mitigate some of that trauma? That's what ESSA is all about. That's what the requirements are all about. When you read about educational stability, you can read the language in ESSA. I've given you the citation here. We're talking about all children in foster care in all schools. But we have about 35 pages of non-regulatory guidance that gives us a blueprint for how we can impact the stability, the educational stability of these children. And it starts with the basic provision that all school districts must provide an assurance that all children in foster care enroll or remain enrolled in the school of origin, unless there's a determination that it's not in their best interest. And here's what that means. It means that we always default to the school of origin as our foster children move placement to placement or enter foster care for the first time. Our first thought should always be the school of origin they are in, unless it's in their best interest to move them. So when you're looking at foster care provisions, always remember your default position is school of origin. We do have some relevant definitions as well that you should be aware of. When we talk about what is a student, that's very well defined. We include our students in pre-K, and that's if your district offers a preschool program. A lot of the work that I do in the beginning of the school year is have deep conversations about our little bitty children. They're in foster care. They may not have been enrolled in school, especially last year. What is their school of origin? Where are we starting? Are we starting where biological mom lives? Are we starting where foster mom lives? And there are different circumstances for every scenario, but we do include those pre-K students if your district has that program. We have a very specific definition for foster care. Foster care is defined as 24-hour substitute care for children placed away from their parents or guardians, and this is important, and for whom the Department of Children's Services has placement and care responsibility. So we all know those grandparents that are angels on earth who take their grandchildren because their biological children are unable to parent at the time, but DCS is not involved. Those children are not considered to be foster children. Those are just children being raised by angels on earth. Those are not children in the care and placement and custody of DCS. But you will see DCS place children in foster family homes, so licensed foster homes. They could be placed in foster homes of relatives, but that is an official DCS placement. Group homes, we have emergency shelters in this state. We have lots of residential facilities, child care institutions, pre-adoptive homes. There's a whole continuum of placements that DCS has available. But also know, kids are spending 24, 48, 72 hours sleeping on the floor of DCS offices because these placements are few and far between. ESSA requires that the state have a foster care point of contact, and that's me, and that every LEA have a foster care point of contact, and that could very well be you. I know that you wear lots of different hats, but we are required in the state and at each district level to have somebody who's designated to really coordinate the services for all of our students in foster care. And that involves coordination with all of our regional DCS offices and a process for implementing all of the provisions of ESSA. And we very frequently see you as the foster care point of contact. It might be a student services director, an attendance director. You know, these folks, as we all know, are responsible for multiple programs. Specific responsibilities for that district point of contact really is that collaboration with DCS. The other big piece is identifying students in foster care and then coordinating the best interest determination meetings. And that could involve face-to-face meetings, it could involve arranging transportation, it could involve multiple phone calls, emails, video, teleconferencing, in order to really figure out what's the best placement for the child. We also expect that the points of contact will help us remove all barriers to enrollment. So you remember, you know, you're in the DCS office with your 33-gallon garbage bag full of your favorite toys and your clothes and the stuff that you wanted to bring with you. And they're looking for a bed, and they're looking for a bed, and they finally find one. So off you go at midnight to a brand new foster home, and the foster parent takes you in, gives you a bed, and the first thing they're going to want to do in the morning is bring you to school, because that's what they know to do, and that's what they think the best thing to do will be. The problem is foster parents don't always live in those original school zones, and they're going to take children to their neighborhood school. So it's really important that we remove those enrollment barriers and train staff on what happens when children appear at their doorsteps. We all, you know, have amazing school secretaries and receptionists who are often that front line, first person a family will encounter. It's really important that our points of contact train all levels of school personnel to know, you know, time out if we have a child identified in foster care, we need to call that district point of contact. We need to ask some questions because we're going to default to school of origin. And it's one thing if it's halfway across the state, but it's another if it's in the same district and we can quickly have some conversations. The other big piece that foster care points of contact are responsible for is identifying students in foster care within the district. It's an interesting process that we use at the state level to push data down to the school district level, and it's probably due for some revision, but there are two ways in which we identify foster children. One, it can come directly from DCS. We would hope that DCS would be notifying our foster care points of contact, and sometimes that happens, and sometimes it doesn't. There are multiple vacancies in DCS. Last I heard, about 600 vacancies in DCS, and so that doesn't always happen. The other way that we identify students in foster care is through our school nutrition list. And it works like this. DCS provides a comprehensive list to our school nutrition division at the Department of Ed. School nutrition division then pushes that list down to the school district level, and then at the school district level, if you have a really robust student information system, it's taking that information, disaggregating it, and you can pull students who are foster care students. In our smaller districts, we actually have people who are hand matching names to that list because their student information systems are not that robust. There are a couple of issues just to be aware of with this process. just so you know, if you're not the foster care point of contact, what folks are going through. The comprehensive list that DCS provides in the summer is every child in foster care. That list is updated every month with students who are new to foster care. What it doesn't do is list every time a child in foster care changes placements or moves foster homes. And that happens a lot. So your foster care points of contact are really tracking students and oftentimes hand matching names with enrollment data in your district. Once students are identified, they are coded very specifically with a foster care code. And then this allows us to track numbers and allows the students as a subgroup then to be more carefully tracked in terms of graduation data and academic progress. Again, we would hope that our DCS education specialists are one of the very first contacts to the district point of contact. It was our hope initially that this would allow for real-time communication between DCS and the school district. And many of our districts and DCS folks have really close connections. The reality is the education specialist is not often the first person to know that a change in placement has been made. A foster care placement could change in the middle of the night, and it's the frontline social worker that's bringing that child to school the next day, and it's not the education specialist. So it may not be DCS education specialists who are notifying district points of contact. It may be that school secretary who's got a parent standing in front of her and a frontline family service worker from DCS saying, we need to enroll this child. Just an indication of what our numbers have looked like with our students that have been coded for the past 3 years. You'll see a decrease in our foster care students. So I think that that's a really good thing. We are typically really close to DCS numbers when we ask them to pull numbers at the end of the year with grade bands and ages that are equivalent to ours. We are very close to the number of students they have listed in their system. So, you know, school districts in Tennessee are doing a wonderful job of tracking, coding, identifying students that are in foster care. So really have to acknowledge the hard work that our foster care points of contact are doing. You'll see your foster care points of contact involved in best interest determination meetings. This is a meeting that occurs between DCS and the LEA to determine what's in the best interest of the student. And it happens when a student enters foster care and it is feasible that he or she could still attend that school of origin. Remember, defaulting to school of origin. Anytime a student is moved within a 60-minute drive of the school of origin, we're going to have that bid meeting. Now, clearly, if a child starts in Knoxville and has a new placement in Memphis, we're not going to have that meeting, right? Oftentimes, it is distance that is preventing us from conducting these meetings. We're not going to have a meeting, a best interest determination meeting, when we're outside of that 60-minute ride. And we're not going to have a meeting if DCS says the student isn't safe at the school of origin. DCS really is that decision maker in that case. There could be a perpetrator nearby in the neighborhood. They don't want any contact with the parents, don't want contact with siblings. There could be a variety of reasons why DCS tells us no, we're not going to have that meeting. And then we're not going to have a meeting if a student is being placed in a residential treatment center with an in-house school of its own. That's a treatment placement, and there is no school of origin conversation at that point. That bid meeting process looks like the DCS education specialist and the district foster care point of contact getting together and having a conversation, either in person, over the phone, Zoom, Teams, can be email if it's a very simple conversation. And in that meeting, they're going to discuss, is the current educational setting appropriate? What is that length of commute? Are we putting a kindergartner on a bus for 60 minutes? Because that's a whole different ball game than putting a senior in high school on a bus for 60 minutes. So we look at that developmental stage and the transportation needs. Are there specialized services at the school of origin that would be impacted, or would the child be impacted? Do we need to consider any of those specialized services? If the child is old enough, we're going to ask the child, hey, where do you want to be? A high school senior is going to tell you where they want to be, what they want to do. We're going to take a look at where siblings might be placed. Again, looking at stability, what's going to provide the stability. Oftentimes we can consider foster siblings to be a sibling set. So we may look at where other foster siblings are attending school. And we're going to look at a history of school transfers. How did the child adjust if we move schools? You know, what kind of impact did that have on the child? All of this is going to be written up on a best interest determination form, and all parties are going to sign off, and a copy is going to be maintained by both the district point of contact and DCS. And this is what that looks like. This is what the best interest determination form looks like. We've tried to streamline it and make it as easy as we possibly can for you to complete and fill out and get signatures. So what does it look like as a state? You know when you fill out the CFA now at the beginning of the next school year, you're going to report to us the number of bid meetings that were held, number of foster students, number of bid meetings. And this is how we're progressing as a state. We're seeing an increase in bid meetings, which is wonderful. That's really what we want to see. Those numbers were really low in 18-19 because it was the very first year that we were tracking this data and asking for this information. So we're doing a great job of holding the bid meetings. When you take a look at students remaining in their school of origin, we're running at about 50 to 60%. And when I ask foster care points of contact why that might be, why are students not remaining in their school of origin, almost always they say distance. So DCS would love to see these numbers higher, but we are moving students clear across the state. Children are moved placement to placement as beds are found, and that 60-minute ride really then becomes the deciding factor. So sort of wrapping it all up into, what does this mean for me if I'm not the foster care point of contact? How does this impact my world? Well, first of all, many of you are that foster care point of contact, especially in a smaller district because you're managing Title I, and this is a part of Title I. If you are involved in monitoring at all, you will be asked to contribute some answers to foster care questions. We will look at the process, we'll look at your procedures, and we'll take a look at how your district is working with educational stability for children in foster care. How is the communication flowing? How are we identifying students? What does that look like specifically in your district? And then, as you know, on the CFA, you're asked to report that number of students in foster care, so you'll have to search that out if you don't have ready access to it. You'll need to know the number of bid meetings that have been held and the number of students remaining in their school of origin. So that's just a piece to know ahead of time so that you can be prepared to seek out those answers if you don't have them already at your fingertips. Also a reminder that we ask you to upload that signed transportation plan. You should all have it. You've done it for 3 years now. It's probably pretty old. It probably has some old signatures on it, and sometimes you contact me and say, hey, do I need to have this signed? We don't require that you have it signed again, but if you want to do that, that's perfectly fine. Many of our LEAs do have fresh signatures on those transportation agreements. And then always remember that you can set aside funds for transportation. Transportation is unbelievably expensive, and especially in our large urban areas where they use private car transportation, those bills are in the tens of thousands of dollars. So just know that you do have the ability to set aside money for transportation. If you are at all interested in reaching out to your colleagues in the Department of Children's Services or making contact with them, do know that we have a list of all of our education specialists in TDOE resources. Unfortunately, you'll see some vacancies on this list, and we do have some ed specialists who are covering half of the state. So they are overwhelmed. So just keep that in mind and be kind and have grace with our DCS colleagues if you reach out to coordinate with them. Okay, I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to ask if any of you have questions, if you have anything that I can help answer or provide some feedback on. I am certainly happy to do that. I'll give you a moment if you want to throw a question in chat or unmute and ask the question. That would be great too. Okay, as you are thinking of any questions you might have, as always, we are so excited to see your feedback. If you'll point your phone at this QR code, it'll lead you to a survey, and you can give me some feedback, what I can do better, how I can improve, or what information was valuable for you. That's always helpful for me to know how I can structure these presentations in a better fashion for you. And seeing no questions or hearing no questions, I am going to go ahead and stop our recording and thank you all very much for your participation. You beat the first group, and that's exciting to see in terms of numbers. I really appreciate the fact that you've been here to listen to a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And once you do your survey, I hope that you have an amazing day. Thank you so much.